This is the Amy Edwards Show, and I'm your host, Amy. This show is here to help all of us live our best life and feel amazing at absolutely every age. We focus on transformation and empowerment through practical tools, strategies, habits, and mindset shifts that will help you unlock your potential, build self-love, and embrace your unique journey. We'll cover everything from health and wellness to personal growth and spirituality with inspiring guests and real conversations. So if you are ready to level up, break out of your comfort zone, and make lasting changes, you're in the right place. It's never too late. In fact, some of your best days haven't even happened yet. Let's get to it. Love this moment and make the next one even shinier. Hello, welcome to the Amy Edwards Show. I'm your host, Amy Edwards, and we're ready to jump right in today. I'm so excited. Our resident expert today is Anne-Marie Anderson. Anne-Marie is a 3-time Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, a keynote speaker, author of the new book, Cultivating Audacity, Dismantle Doubt, and Let Yourself Win. And she has decades of experiences on networks like ESPN, NBC, Fox, and she's now just empowering countless individuals to overcome fear and rejection. You know, that's what we're all about on this show. Silence their inner critic and build the confidence to take loud, bold, audacious steps toward the life they love. I am like so here for this. She is a true expert in helping individuals dismantle that self-doubt and cultivate the audacity, and I love this so much, the audacious mindset that is needed to take bold risks and create a fulfilling life. So welcome to the show. I'm so happy that you're here.
Thanks so much for having me, Amy. What an introduction. I'm excited to be here.
Oh my gosh. This is so aligned with all the things that I talk about on this show. This is so aligned with how I want to live my life and what I'm constantly in practice of. And tell me what really audacity means to you and living an audacious life really means to you and looks like for you.
You know, growing up, my parents used to say, you're so audacious. You have the audacity to ask me that. I thought it was a negative thing, right? You have the audacity to ask that, the audacity to speak. Until I looked it up. And audacity, by definition, Amy, is the willingness to take bold, sometimes surprising risks. And I was talking to my sister-in-law, who is from Argentina, and she said, audacity is a great thing in our country. Mm-hmm. There is no negative connotation next to it. So for me, audacity and audacious living is about doing the unexpected to get to where you want to be, something that's in terms and in line with your vision, values, and goals.
Agreed. So agreed. I always think of, Obama's book, The Audacity of Hope, and just, it made me think more about that word. And I really like it. And I think for women, though, particularly, there can be this connotation of oh, you're too out there,
Yep. It was bossy, right? People would say, oh, bossy, cocky, audacious, all of that. And we've learned now, bossy is executive leadership skills. It's just labels from other people.
Big time. And I bet in the fields that you've worked in, you've just experienced so much of this and have countless stories. What was a catalyst for you stepping into this in your own life?
Stepping into audacity?
Yeah.
Well, so it came from a couple of different things. I started at ESPN at a very young age, at 21 years old, kind of lucky to get an interview there and then worked my way into it. And about 2 years into working there, Amy, a man that I had interned for when I was in college got his dream job as SportsCenter anchor, right? A big deal on ESPN's flagship show. He's 37, just got married, super nice guy, very fit. And the short story of it is he came into work on his 6th day, didn't know anybody, hadn't been on air yet, and died. Had an aneurysm right there at his desk. I was performing CPR on him along with my roommate, and obviously we did not have the ability to resuscitate him. And I remember thinking, if you can be 37 and newly married and fit and land your dream job and have it taken away like that, I was never going to wait for anything ever again. It really shook me. And at that moment, I decided I was going to start asking for things. I had always been too shy. I'd always been, I don't want anybody to think I'm cocky. I don't want anybody to think I'm bossy. Mm-hmm. And at that moment, I'm like, let's just go. And the last decades I have spent doing exactly that.
I feel like sometimes we have those catalyst moments and we don't allow ourselves to really lean in. And you really did, because if we'll allow ourselves to be impacted by that, by those things that happen, it can change the whole trajectory of our life and shift our perspective if we'll allow it. Because haven't you seen people that won't go all the way, won't go there, and you're like, how can they not?
Yeah, for some people, I suppose they could be more fearful, right?
Yeah.
My friend's name is Peter, and his family was generous enough to let me tell his story in the introduction of the book, because it's something that literally I've thought about for 30 years. And some people will see that and say, well, I'll just be afraid because something could happen at any time. There's nothing Peter could have done. He did everything right. It just, that was his time. And so, yeah, you can go one of two ways, Amy. I agree with you entirely. But one of the ways is leading you nowhere. And the other one is just leading you to possibilities.
Agreed. Right. Leading to possibilities. That's that big mindset shift. I had that happen to a friend of mine that called himself a human 2.0, and he was my band partner. I was an independent rock and roll artist in my 40s. And he literally just fell on the stairs and died. And at 51 years old. And so older than your friend, but it's still so jarring and so affecting. And how are you going to lean into that, And it can really just make you see life so differently. So I'm so sorry for the loss. And it just makes no sense. But to turn it into something beautiful and really let it add color to your life, spread your peacock feathers is really stunning, really beautiful, really a beautiful tribute, right? So
thank you.
So let's talk about how that started to unfold for you and push you to share this with others.
So it's starting to unfold for me when I started to see that there were some barriers in my way, right? For me, my big barrier was always fear. Just
Same.
Right? It's a huge one. It's always one of four things, Amy. It's either fear, time, money, your inner critic, usually a combination for most people. Like you, fear of embarrassment, rejection, judgment, being exposed, whatever you want it to be. And so I started to actively, believe it or not, it sounds crazy, seek out rejection. Because I thought, well, if I get rejected professionally, if I get rejected enough, then it's going to take some of the sting out of it. So I, was living in Bristol, Connecticut, shoveling snow, and went on a vacation in February to visit my brother in Southern California, and people were playing beach volleyball. And I was like, what am I doing? I was 26 at the time. What am I doing? I'm a volleyball player. And why was I not there? And so I went back to my boss at ESPN and said, hey, I want to be LA bureau producer. And he said, well, we already have an LA bureau producer. And I was like, I know. That's what makes this conversation so awkward. What? And, but a long story short is he said, we can't do it. I gave him my notice and said, whatever time you need, but I feel like this is something I need to do. He called me impatient. I totally agreed. I got in my car after however many weeks I gave him and drove cross country. And I only knew that I wasn't going to shovel snow, Amy. I didn't know what I was going to do for work, but I knew what I wasn't going to do. And ESPN hired me back at double the salary. And I thought, wow, that was a bold risk. I wasn't bluffing. I did not have the expectation of that. And once I started to realize that by creating my life, not just my job, my life the way I wanted it to, things started to really flow. And that was an eye-opener for me.
I love that, creating a life. Like back in the 90s, I listened to Tony Robbins. I bought the cassettes or something like that. And he talked about designing your life. And I remember just having a mindset shift then and being like, oh, this isn't about your job or whatever, but we actually have the ability to design our life how we want and just decide. That seems like an audacious leap, right? For a mindset or something.
For sure. How you want your days and nights to be spent. First of all, I'd love that you say a cassette, let the blind back.
Oh, go.
I'm right with you. Mister, I'm right there. I'm right with you. But yes, that's exactly it. Because sometimes I'm called to speak to college graduates or emerging leaders in corporations. And when I ask them, hey, here comes the question, what do you want to do with your life that everybody asks you? So I'll just ask it. and I throw it out there. And they start yelling out. I said, just yell it out. And when it's the young people, maybe they're like YouTube or an accountant or a doctor or whatever. And I let them go for about a minute. And then I stop them and I say, wait, I asked what you wanted to do with your life, and you gave me a bunch of jobs. Is that all you want with your life, is to work? And they're like, oh, yeah, I guess not. I'm like, your days and your nights. For me, it meant being in warmer weather, clipping my pager on the net and playing beach volleyball. And I still live in the same town now. It meant spending time traveling with my family. For somebody else, it may be, living near a river. It could be anything, living close to their parent. It could be anything you want. But you have to think about the whole life because your job is just a part of it.
It's just a part of it. Absolutely. Back to rejection. How do you have a tougher skin than most people? Or because if you were described as audacious from a young age, maybe you do. So what do you tell people about getting over that hump of not caring about rejection? Because that's such a big part of the fear,
First of all, I absolutely did not have tougher skin. I was the opposite. Everything. I swear the wind, a breeze could hurt my feelings. So I promise you, I am not that way. I was called audacious, but here's the deal. It stuck with me for far too long. My father, my biggest cheerleader, he's since passed away. My biggest cheerleader always. When I was 11, he said to me, Anne-Marie, you're getting a little cocky. And it was like a stab wound for me. Like, oh my gosh. I only hung on to it for 40 years, Amy. 40 years. Where as I was writing the book, I thought, yeah, I remember when he called me cocky, like really, out all the positive things he said throughout my life. And I looked up the definition of cocky. And it said someone who is so sure of their own abilities that they annoy other people. And I thought, sure of my abilities? Yeah. Like in television, I've been working in television 35 years. I know what I'm doing. I'm very confident in that. It annoys other people. Well, that's something my teenager would call OPP, other people's problems. And once I kind of really realized that, so no, I did not have thicker skin, and I still don't necessarily have thicker skin than other people. But here's my advice to your point. Go fail, go get rejected, and watch yourself survive.
Mm-hmm.
Because it isn't the end. When you catastrophize it, and here's what's going to happen if I'm rejected. Well, what exactly is going to happen? And I do this all the time with clients. I do some private coaching, and it's like, well, okay. And I make them take it to this ridiculous level. I was speaking with one client, and she's like, okay. And then I'm so nervous that then I pass out. And I'm like, okay, so you're laying on the floor in HR during the interview for the job, and then what happens? And she started laughing. She's like, okay, I'm probably not going to pass out on the floor in the middle of the interview. And I said, you're probably not. So the result's probably going to be just a little bit shy of that, and you're not going to be named VP. And so when you start realizing that you can fail, you can be rejected, and you can survive, and then use that information as data going forward, it changes everything. But it takes practice.
Ain't that the truth? It's come with age for me too. Like the older I get, the more I'm like, oh yeah, I'll survive this too. Everything's going to be all right at the end of the day. I'm still going to go to bed.
You convey that to younger people that are in their 20s and 30s. Just say, my mother used to say it all the time, this too shall pass. But it's completely true. And I think you're right. Like once you hit 50, then you're like, well.
I'm like, okay, yeah, I got this. And, I'm glad you brought up younger people because I was thinking about that when you mentioned the people that you talk to. Because I've talked to so many people and they act like their dreams have passed them by. And I wonder what you tell those people when they think that ship has sailed. I met one girl that's a musician here in Austin, Texas, which they're everywhere. But she was like 35 and she was like, I wish I could have learned to play the guitar. And I was like, well, like you have hands and, I don't know what's holding you back. And so, yeah, I literally picked up a guitar at 39 or 38. And so anyway, what do you tell people when they feel like, oh God, now I'm 30, I'm too old,
Isn't that something?
Isn't it?
I wrote a book after 50. I didn't go full-time on camera until 37. I had my first child at 37. Like that doesn't exist. But I get it. When I had my first kid, I thought, well, that was 16 years at ESPN. That was a great career, but I can't do that anymore. I don't know why I thought that. So the point being, at any age, you've seen all the numbers about people who haven't started their real big career after 50.
Yep.
There's no start point. You're not late for anything. You're right on time. And I think you really hit it a moment ago when you said, yeah, the older I've gotten, the more I've gotten comfortable with that. Everybody gets there in their own time. So trust yourself that it's going to get better and better. I mean, I would not want to be 29 again. No way. But that's really hard for a 29-year-old to understand.
It really is. It's so tough to express. That's why I was getting like your take on it as well, and what you say. If someone like that were like, okay, fine, I'm going to seek out rejection. What are some ways where they can start?
Okay, great question. And I love it. So there's 3 components for me in terms of an audacious mindset, right? There's first of all, the mindset that really, Amy, is just based in optimism, right? Like I'm a sports person. And so if you're trailing by 12 at the half, why do you come out and play the second half of the game? Because you're hoping that maybe you might be able to win if things go well, right? It's just optimism that things will work out. Maybe they won't work out the way you want them to, but they will, as you put it just a moment ago, it'll all work out. Okay. Second step, though, is behavior. Requires an action. Audacious behavior requires some kind of an action. Because you can sit on your couch being optimistic all day long and nothing's going to happen. So until you get up and take an action. And then when those 2 things get married together, actions and that optimism of like, well, things will be okay if I do this, that's when you develop your identity. So in terms of starting it, go do something, anything unexpected today. For some people, that's just saying no. Just no. Whatever it is. No, I'm not going to do that. Or making a call. Or reaching out to somebody who you don't know, maybe, who's doing what you want to do. Because you can get to anybody on social media these days and asking them questions because they might just write you back and say, yes, somebody helped me. So let me give you a little bit of advice. But if you're too afraid of them saying no, then you'll never get the opportunity for a yes. So does that make sense? Like, so the more you practice it, and so do the unexpected today, like not tomorrow, don't plan for it. Don't say Monday, I'm going to start Monday. I'm going to make some really big, no, today, whatever today is, like make a move today. And one move will lead to another and will lead to another.
It's truly a domino effect. Yes. And it's wild to me at the end of the day when I do some things and I look back and I go like, oh my gosh, I check in with how I really feel. Like I feel good. And I'm like, okay, I did something. Even when it didn't go as successfully or the way I wanted it to look. It's like a I don't know if I'd call it a snowball effect, but it does, just build up your resilience.
I love that you're saying like you check in with yourself there, because what I learned to do also, and this may be helpful to people that are super afraid of rejection, I check in with myself after rejection too, which I never used to do, right? You want to shove that down most of the time and it doesn't really go away. So I'll say, I feel really bad about that. That hurt. Like they don't think that I'm good enough for that. Or I really feel like shit. Like I don't shy away from that feeling anymore. And I really think this is important for your listeners. I certainly don't get rejected, from something and just go, well, anyway, like if it hurts, it hurts. But where I used to run from it and avoid it, now I sit and I say, that hurt. That hurt. And why did it hurt? Did it hurt because somebody's opinion that I wasn't good enough? Did it hurt because I wasn't prepared? Does it hurt? To really dig into that. And that changes so much for me because it isn't. And I think a lot of people that are afraid of rejection feel like, well, you just got to get over it. No, you got to go through it, not over it, through it. And so if it hurts, sit and feel how it hurts. And once you survive that, that's great practice too.
What's the line where you're like, okay, I've sat with that long enough? Do you just sort of have a moment when it fades? Or because I have one friend and when she gets negative comments on her stuff, she'll be like, I will really set a timer for 5 minutes and I'll really feel it. And then I'm like, okay, I'm done with that. She like tries to reduce the time. Do you have like a limit where you're like, okay, can't I like 40 years with the cocky comment,
Right. Yeah, exactly. My friend is really long, my time. That's so funny. I love that she has that in a timer. I don't. It depends on what it is. Sometimes I just fight back. And sometimes I don't. I'm thinking of a particular rejection I got after I was told I had a job. Then I was told I didn't have the job because someone who I'd never met wanted to hire their friend. And my kids were young at the time, and I was crushed because I had cleared my schedule for it and the whole thing. And so I was crying because I'm a big time crier. And I was crying, and I walked out to my 3 young little kids, and I was like, don't let anybody ever tell you you can't do something. Got my bag and went to the airport. And my husband at the time was like, what's happening? And I said, I'm going up there. It's a 45-minute flight away to let him know who he didn't hire, because I'm not going to leave it right here. So sometimes it was addressing it. And I ended up going up there and meeting him. And he said, it's not personal. I said, of course it is. I'm a person, but that's fine, whatever. And then he ended up hiring me anyway and giving me a raise, which is another audacious thing. Like I never expected. And I even told him at the end of the interview, thanks for meeting with me. I do not want to work for you. And he said, what? And I said, I don't want to work for you if somebody else tells you you have to have me. Like, only if you want me, that's the only reason. Because I'm not going to come into work every day and have you go, oh, here's that girl that I didn't want to have anyway. So thanks for meeting. And that was enough for him, where he called then and gave me a little bit of a bump and hired me for the job.
Oh my God, that's a good story.
Isn't that crazy though? But yeah.
Yes, that's amazing.
But that's more out of rejection, right? So they rejected me. What's the other option I could have done? I could have been like, that's a bummer. Okay, hung up and cried and cried and cried. Period. You know what I mean? Like then what? What do you do at that point? I would have gotten over it eventually, but from that job, I ended up having 6 years worth of work.
No, that's so interesting because like, okay, one of my big lessons in life has been about surrender. And I've talked about it on this show a ton. And it's about surrendering to the moment and trusting that there is something, like a lot of times when you're in that mindset, you could say, okay, that wasn't meant for me. And while it hurts and stings, it wasn't meant for me. And I'm going to surrender to whatever is coming for me. Rather than getting on a plane and being like, hey, guess what you missed? MF, and so like, it's a whole different thing, and I'm like,
I love that.
So I think I'm like figuring out, okay, how do you check in with yourself and know like, yeah, I'm going to march over there and just be like, hey, and like balance that with just this attitude of surrender. And I trust that things are going to be okay and go the way they need to go for me.
Yes. It's a great question. I love that you were like, hey, I want you to see what you missed. Like,
Yeah, I mean, like you did. And then you were like,
revenge body or something,
I mean, that was bold. And you were like, I'm so confident in myself. I know what I've got, that's so cool.
It's a I will say this. I didn't know that he was going to hire me, so I went there because I knew I was right for the job. I really believed I was right for the job, especially compared to his friend who was, somebody that he trusted, which I appreciate, but wasn't right for this particular network opportunity. And I was going to be okay. I was okay with not getting the job. I think that's a big part of it, is knowing like I expected to go up there, say what I had to say, but not necessarily be able to change his mind. So I didn't go in there with like, hey, look at what you missed. And
that's kind of being that, I didn't think it in.
Oh, you're so fantastic. I have to have you. No, but I think it's the funniest thing. But you have to be okay with the outcome either way. I'd have to be okay with him saying, get the hell out of my office, whatever. My thing always to people is like, they can't fire you. He hasn't hired you yet. So in this particular case, what's he going to do? Fire me? Like he just said he wasn't going to hire me. So there was nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose. Right.
Yeah.
And maybe that's where the surrender is too. It's like, I am going to really stand up for myself and be proud of myself. And I knew I had something to offer them. And then that's where the surrender is, right? Is when in that moment when you're just like, I am totally cool with this because I know things are going to be fine for me. I know, my skill set and all that. So
yeah,
really cool. Yeah.
Exactly. Because you can't rely on them to then say, oh yeah, you're right. I see what you see and I will take you. It's all about, are you okay with yourself regardless of the outcome? And
yeah, that's
confidence. You're going to be okay.
That's that self-confidence that's like maintaining control rather than giving your control and power away to someone else, which is always a bad idea because then that's a recipe for feeling terrible about yourself and really giving over your rejection. You must have a really supportive partner.
I'm divorced. How about that?
Worse, you're solo now. Okay.
Yes, although my ex-husband is very supportive. I have a great group of friends. My kids, my ex-husband is part of that. I call all of them, I'm a big proponent on your front row. Like when you want to do something audacious, when you want to make a move, I talk to people about you need to cultivate like a front row of people that probably does not have your mom in it, probably not your best friend, maybe not your spouse, because they all want you to be safe and not get hurt. And so when you're going to go do the big audacious thing, you need to tell a couple of people because you have to make it public. And these are the people that are going to check in on you. They will lift you up. They will hold you accountable. You can bounce ideas off of them. You're okay failing in front of them. Because when you have that front row and have made it public, I mean, I can't tell you how many times over the last year and something as I was writing my book, people were like, how's the book coming along? How's the book? There was no way I was going to get out at writing a book because I had told my front row, this is happening. So your front row is really important. So my ex-husband is supportive, but I've also got a great group of friends and my kids are supportive and my family.
Wow. Okay. That is a gem. I love that. And I love that you specifically talk about how they want to keep you safe, right? They want you here, and they are oftentimes, or at least your parents, something like that, comfortable with you staying where you are because then they don't have to like stretch and stuff. And I know that I've experienced that when people are like, you're really doing that, Yeah, I know. You're not my front row, apparently, if you say that.
Exactly. You don't even get a seat. You're on the back row of the room.
Yeah. Standing room only. All right.
Yeah. Again, some of them everybody brings their own prism of experiences. So they might be afraid of change. They might be afraid of you changing because then it's going to change them, as you were talking about. There's so many things when they're attached to the outcome themselves. And your partner, your best friend, your parent will be attached to the outcome.
Yeah.
But when it is somebody else in your firm or your friends, your success or change isn't going to necessarily change their life. That's a great person to have in your front row.
This podcast is sponsored by Wands. Wands creates luxurious pleasure practice tools that help people become more connected to their bodies. They have a huge selection of incredible items like yoni eggs, the most gorgeous crystal pleasure wands you've ever seen, free bleed blankets, and my favorites, the trademarked glass cervix wand and the Venus wand, which is their heaviest wand made of stainless steel, and their new ecstatic vibrator. This company is woman-owned and creates products designed to help you become more connected to your body and your pleasure and support the healing of pelvic pain. Get yours today in their always discreet packaging at wands.com. That's Wands with 2 A's, WAANDS.com, and use my link in the show notes to get 10% off or enter the code Amy Edwards at checkout. Again, that's Wands, WAANDS.com. This podcast is sponsored by the Collective ATX. If you're looking for the best in hair extensions, it's the Collective ATX. They do mine, and I won't go anywhere else. I've tried them all over the years, and finally, I've found what makes my real hair stronger and fuller, and even works with my natural curl. They keep all their extensions in-house, so there's no wait, and they specialize in no damage to your natural hair like traditional hair extension methods. Plus, they're pros at color and covering gray. I have literally never in my life been happier with my color. They were named a top 200 salon by Salon Today in 2023. They've changed my hair journey. Let them change yours. The Collective ATX link is in the show notes. I want to touch on something that you mentioned earlier. You mentioned the 4 things that usually hold us back. It was fear, time, money, inner critic, I believe, right? Yes. I am so glad that you put money in there because so many times we let that hold us back. Have you had experience with that holding you back, and how did you overcome it? What do you tell people about that, money in particular?
I'm so glad you asked that, Amy, because whenever I talk about it, people want to talk about a couple of other things, but people don't even want to talk about money.
Because it's a weird, fearful subject.
It's a weird, fearful subject. And what I came to realize, of course, a lot of it goes back to how you grew up. If you grew up with your mom at the grocery store going, gosh, I hope this credit card goes through, so we can get these, that's going to cause a certain amount of anxiety that you're going to carry with you until you really examine that story. If you grew up on the other side with super wealthy parents who did everything for you, you're going to have maybe some self-esteem issues about, can I really earn anything myself? I mean, it all ties back. So a couple of things. For people who just simply don't want to talk about money, don't want to look at money, they don't have enough money, whatever it is, I recommend the most simple thing, and it came from one of my friends who struggled with money. She said when she brushed her teeth every morning, she also looked at her bank balance just to see it, because she wanted to stick her head in the sands and not see it. So if she had $10 in her bank balance, she would say, thank you, $10 for being here. If it was $1,000, thank you, 1,000. But she got herself kind of neutralized to how much was in there. Because some people, you kind of just don't want to look. You're thinking, oh, I don't want to know. So I thought that was really interesting for her. For other people, like I grew up in a family where we had enough, right? My parents were very tight. We didn't do a lot of gifts. We didn't do a lot of expensive vacations or anything. So I grew up kind of holding on to my money, right? So I'm a good saver, but to my own detriment. Because then when I'm a full-time broadcaster, a full-time speaker, a full-time mom, and I decide to write a book, I'm drowning in all the details. And I had to learn to exchange money for energy. So I ended up hiring an assistant because I tracked what I was doing every day. And I didn't want to be spending all my time doing expense reports and flights and trying to organize contracts and all of that. So if I was able to spend some money, which is like, prying it out of my hands, to pay somebody to do that, it freed me up to do more of what I love, which brings us all the way back down to your life. Maybe what I wanted to do was more prospecting clients, but maybe it's I just wanted to read a book to my kids. And I needed to create some more time to be able to do that. And so it took an exchange of money to get the energy back to do it. So it's more seeing time and money, I call them twins, as commodities. You got to know how much of it you have before you distribute it well.
I like that. And it's redefining wealth to know that your time is part of your wealth too. I think like they both fall under that umbrella of wealth, right? And then you are wealthier with your personal time that you're able to spend with your kids or however you want to design your life, right?
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk for a minute about urgency, because I think you talk about that. A friend of mine is staying with me right now. He's a walking inspirational quote. And he was like, he was talking yesterday about how people underestimate what they can do in 5 years and overestimate what they can do in 1 year. And I know that you talk about an urgency trap. And so how do you help people prioritize long-term tasks that really matter?
I love that. I love what your friend is saying. I'm completely in line. Well, so here's the deal. Like everything seems urgent to us all the time, and a lot of times what people will say is, I want to, and then you name whatever your big audacious goal is. For me, like writing a book, I want to, and I'll get to it as soon as I finish all these urgent tasks, right? You're allowed, because urgent doesn't end ever. It's a constant wheel. So once you kind of differentiate between what's urgent and what's important, we can get to work. So things that are urgent require immediate attention, usually because they've got a deadline and a pressing deadline. They give great satisfaction when you cross them off the list. I mean, I'm one of those people who likes to write a list and then just cross.
Oh my God. I'm a list maker. I love it.
Every day I start off with all kinds of great lists here and there, cross them off. And then, urgent tasks that give you that sense of satisfaction. Things that are important may not have a set deadline, but they have real consequences if you don't accomplish them. You've heard about people writing books for years, right? They spend 5 years writing a book because they weren't able to determine that was important and push urgent aside. Anything that's important brings you closer to your values, visions, and goals. So first of all, you have to define what's urgent and what's important. And then realize that most things that are urgent can wait 15 minutes. Like, is it really urgent that you return that text? That you make dinner right now, that you return that email, that you pay the bill? It's going to get done for sure. But does it have to be done right now? Because when I first started writing the book, I thought, all right, this is what everybody does, right? I'm going to get up an hour earlier every day and I'm going to write for an hour. So I got up at 4:30 in the morning.
Ugh.
And oof is right. Like it worked, but it sucked. It was horrible. I was exhausted. And by the time I get to 6 o'clock, the family's like, hi, mommy. And I'm like, what do you want? It was horrible. And so I decided for me, I needed to chunk it into 4 15-minute blocks during the day. And I literally, simple as set my alarm. That alarm would go off, close everything down, turn my phone off, except for a timer, and just write. And, sometimes the kids would be at the door and they'd be like, Mommy, I'm hungry. And I'd be like, I bet. But they really won't like it when you say that. But they're not going to starve in the 15 minutes. But we get caught up into like, oh, I have to do this now to be good. So prioritize urgent versus important, and then make sure you get scheduled time for what's important to move you closer every day. Otherwise, urgent never ends.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I think even if it's just a short amount of time, even if it's 5 minutes, you've taken a step. And that's like, at the end of the day, you're able to really be like, I took that step.
Yeah. And if you schedule it,
schedule it.
20 minutes. I had another client who he got up a half hour early, and then he worked out with his wife that in the half hour the kids were in the bath, he'd help her get the kids into the bath. Then he would go study for this particular license exam that he needed, and then rejoin for bed and bath. So he created his hour in conjunction with his partner to meet his goals.
Yeah, absolutely. Great idea. So I see your Emmys behind you. I am curious, did anything surprise you about achieving those goals or being recognized by your peers in that way? Was it all that you thought it would be, or did anything surprise you about it? I guess I'm just curious.
It's funny. I'm not a big gifts person, and I'm not a big awards person. So these Emmys, first of all, I gave them to my parents originally, and my parents had absolutely no clue what they were. It was hilarious. My mom's opening it, and I'm on the phone with her, and I'm like, Mom, open it. And she's like, it's a trophy of a woman holding a basketball. I'm like, Mom, I don't play basketball. Okay. So like, never mind, moment's gone, kind of thing. But she had it, my parents had it in their house for years. Then my mom made me take it back when she moved into retirement home. And I had them in my closet because it isn't what my life is about. Like that wasn't the goal. And that's a really important thing. I really appreciate them, and they're collaborative, which means a lot more to me. They're team. So these were earned as part of a team. But what really gets to me is like the goal is to do work that I love. And I loved every bit of work that I did that ended up resulting in those Emmys along with our team.
Then that's a mindset shift right there. I think that's really beautiful. I love that it's your team too. Oh my gosh, that's so cool. And to let it represent something else rather than boosting your ego is really incredible. Like, I think so many times we don't even understand what it'll mean. And then when you do get it, maybe it's not what you thought. And like reframing it in that way is really beautiful. So congratulations. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And it's funny because they only came out of my closet for the Zoom background about years ago.
Yeah.
So the kids had no idea, my oldest son is 19, and they're sitting there and his friends come in and they're like, what's that? And he's like, oh, my mom's Emmys. And they're like, I didn't know your mom had an Emmy. He's like, same. I didn't either. The best isn't the focus of our life. So it cracks me up. So I was like, your volleyball trophies are everywhere. We may as well put my work awards somewhere.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I like it. It's a good background, and it's I think a really cool answer and perspective that you have around those. Because I live with a former professional athlete, my fiance, and he would get his hand raised in the ring. He was MMA, and it wasn't as fulfilling as he thought. And he's reframed that himself and talks a lot about that. So that was kind of why I asked too, because you achieve these things in life that you think is going to design your life in a certain way. And then you get there and maybe it didn't. And then you have to go, wait a minute, what does this actually mean to me?
I love that, Amy. And it's so important to note that there's not an end. Like, even when we're talking about audacity, right? There's not an end to your audacious goal. Like, okay, now I've gotten there. There's no end. Because again, we're talking about your life. The very last chapter in the book is the reevaluation loop. Because you're constantly, or at least I hope you are, constantly evaluating whether your life, your relationships, your health and fitness is working for you. Mm-hmm. And it needs to constantly be revamped. So that's a really interesting point because, your hand being raised in the ring or you being given a certain award, if you're thinking of it like an end point of like, okay, I got there, now what's going to happen? I could see where it leads to a lot of discontent and unfulfillment.
And fear, right? Because then you're like holding on to something
tightly and afraid to grow, afraid to change, right? You've probably seen that a lot in your line of work.
I always say FOMO. Like, I don't have FOMO, the fear of missing out. I think, and you'll agree with me, like, as you get older, you kind of have JOMO, like a joy of missing out, Like, can you come to the party? And no, I can't. I've got plans. I'm only laying on the ground with my dog today. But anyway, you just kind of keep that working. But I do have what I call FOSS, the fear of staying the same.
Oh,
People, it's staying stuck. For me, it's staying the same. I just don't want to stay the same, because if you stay the same, you have no chance of growing. It ensures that there is no growth possible. Nothing. You stay the same, you're going to stay the same. No growth in it. So I just want to keep growing, as do you. I can tell by our conversation and listening to your podcast, which I love, by the way.
thank you.
The opportunity to grow means, there's an opportunity to fail. There's an opportunity in that failure to get information that might lead you in a different direction or teach you how to do something better. But it's a great point you made. Like, there's not an end point. Your hand in the ring, you won, can be a really intimidating moment for the victor, because it's like, well, now what do I do?
Mm-hmm. Do you believe in failure?
No, I don't.
No,
They can
don't either.
that word. That's funny. You don't either. Yeah, people really love that word. And that's why I always have to do the old air quotes whenever I say the word failure, because for me, it's data. Like, it's just information. Okay, that didn't work very well, so maybe I should try this differently. Well, that didn't work either. Okay, let's try this. I love that. I've got another sisterhood that does not like failure.
I mean, I think that's audacious in itself, right? To just say that's not a reality for me. For me, that phrase, I learn or I grow. And that's it, right? And I've had to adopt that, because I set myself, the failure that I was measuring was beyond my control. Just like those Emmys, really. That's, you can do your best work and still not get the award,
Oh, yeah.
And it's we've all seen it. And so it's like letting go of that. Okay, right. As long as I know I did my best, honestly, that's a win, period.
Yes, absolutely. And that goes back to that story of when I flew up to talk to that executive who didn't want me. The win was in flying up there. The win was in facing it. It wasn't in getting the job, because, to your point, out of my control. Getting an Emmy Award, out of my control. Getting recognized in the music business, out of your control in whatever way. So the actual win is in the action, not in the outcome. That's really important for people to understand.
So many people would have written an email, and you flew up there like, I mean, I'm so impressed by that.
But there was another one not too long ago where somebody, a different network executive, decided he didn't like my voice. That was his whole thing. I don't like her voice. I was like, okay. Well, so I decided not to fly there for that one, because, like, what am I going to do? Talk him into my voice? Okay, like, this is my voice. I'm not going to change my voice, whatever. So those you just let go and say, okay, have a great day,
Mm-hmm.
So it depends. I mean, I'm not going to fly to every rejection I get. There's been hundreds of rejections, and say, you really should like my voice. You really should hire me. You really should, I can't control any of that.
No. And it's not about you really should. It's just about, hey, I just wanted you to know,
Yeah.
It's about stepping up for yourself more than anything else. So, okay. What lessons have you learned as a parent, and how do you instill this? You mentioned earlier that you say these things to your kids, like that story, and you were like, or maybe it was a different story, but how you just said, I'm doing this. And I know that the way I live, I try to live my life as an example to I have daughters in particular. So I'm like, I want them to see that you can do whatever you want at any age. So how does that look for you with your kids?
It's part of everyday life with my kids. I have 3 kids. My youngest is my daughter. I have 2 sons as well. And it's interesting. I was listening to her talk to herself, right? I pick her up from school and she says, can't do math. I think I'm stupid. And oh, by the way, I'm fat. And I was like, yo, like, that's an emergency, right? For me, like, when you talk to yourself that way. So we really dug in. And, I started with her by saying, do you think I'm fat? And she's like, what? No, because she's never heard me say a negative thing about my body ever. And it's not like I'm in love with my body. You know what I mean? But like, I just don't ever do that. And I said, so you would never say that to me. And would you say that to your friends? And, this is the same conversation we've all had, well, if you wouldn't say it to somebody else, why say it to yourself? But I told her, you're actually not, it's just a voice. So let's separate that voice from you, because I know Lena, that's my daughter's name, Lena wouldn't say that. So let's give that voice a name. And so she picked the name Jerry. And I said, what would you do if Jerry was in the backseat of the car right now saying, you're fat, you can't do math, and you're stupid, whatever. And she goes, I'd say, shut up, Jerry. And I said, exactly, because it isn't you. And so still when I hear her in the kitchen going, oh, I can't do this, I'll yell, shut up, Jerry. Oh, stop. But it's about recognizing the power that you have in your life, to your point with the kids, to create it however you want to do. And so it's so fun. And I'm sure you see this in your daughter, when you see them actually kind of take that lesson, when you see somebody audaciously grab it. When my oldest son, grabbed this particular moment in a game as a freshman in college, and everybody's like, oh, so nerve-wracking. And I'm like, no, it isn't, because I know what this kid's going to do, So I think all of us want to be examples for our kids. And I think we can put our own fears on our kids. And that's why you really need to examine your fears. The same way we wouldn't let our parents be in our front row because they might be worried about us failing. We have to be conscious that we're not trying to overprotect our kids, especially from their feelings.
Oh, that's good. And that just goes back to silencing your inner critic, and a great, super simple tactic. I was sitting here like, why haven't I named mine? I mean, I've done all this work, and I don't have a name for what's yours? Do you have a name for yours?
Yeah, Buford.
Buford. Nice.
I mean, it's just, I'm never going to meet a Buford. And my older son said he had a conversation with his where he said, look, dude, you're not allowed to drive. I know that you're going to be a passenger in my car my entire life, right? Which your critic is, but you're not allowed to drive, and you're not even allowed to touch the radio. And I was like, good for you. He's like, so it's there, and it's going to say what it needs to say, but you're not making decisions. The inner critic, he said, I'm not going to let you make decisions.
Oh my God, kids are so hilarious. I love it.
Yeah. I was like, I like it.
Okay, what have we missed? What do we need to cover before we stop this conversation?
The biggest thing for me, I'm glad you asked, for anybody listening, maybe like, this all sounds great, but I can't, but. So my thing is this: you can step by step. Maybe it's not the thing that you think you want, but are you sure? Are you sure that you can't? So ask yourselves the questions first. Like, what are you good at? What do you love? What does the world need? All of those things. But I'm telling you, in this book, and this is a pitch for my book, I totally recognize that, but I don't just leave you hanging there and say, be brave, face your fear, look at your money. It is step by step. Okay, today, here's what I want you to do. And then look at, your fear. Is it rejection, this and that? To go through step by step, because there is a process that can help you be a more audacious version of you. And I promise you, when you start to design your life by examining why you do the things that you do, you can create a life that you are so excited to wake up to every day. I think that's the number one thing I really want people to understand. Your life as it is today doesn't have to be the life that you have tomorrow. You are in charge of it, and you can create something that you're really excited about.
That's so powerful. I mean, we have that within us. So are you going to do it? Right?
Right. And what are you going to do today? That's it. Just today. You don't have to do the whole thing today. Just tell a friend today. Schedule 3 20-minute sessions where you start researching online people who do the thing that you want to do or live the life. And this goes too, if you didn't want to change your relationship, if it's not serving you, you need to look at that, whatever it is in your life.
100%. So thank you so much. And your book is coming out in just a couple of weeks, and start the new year with it. Amazing, right? Tell everyone how they could find you, follow you, get the book.
Sure, thanks. It's available right now on Amazon in pre-order. So you can grab it now right before January 1st. It's called Cultivating Audacity, Dismantle Doubt, and Let Yourself Win. And originally I was going to call it And Take Bold Risks, but the word risks freaked people out. Like that's how paralyzed we can be. So look on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you buy your books. You can also find me at my website, AnneMarieAnderson.com. I have an E on the end of Anne. And of course, I'm all over social media, here, there, and everywhere with Anne Marie Anderson TV or Cultivating Audacity.
Awesome. And all those links, including to the book, will be in the show notes. So anybody can just easily go find everything that they need to connect with you and get the book. And I like that you said, and let yourself win. Like there's something so positive and up about that, So yeah. And we're the ones holding ourselves back.
Right.
I'd say a lot of the time.
Yeah. And we don't even know why because it's so buried.
Ain't that the truth? Well, thank you so much for being here today. I am so excited to share this message because it's just so aligned for me. And it was a joy to meet you and share your voice. Your beautiful voice, by the way.
I
like your voice.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great to meet you and somebody else who doesn't believe in failure, believes in just it's all information. I love that.
It is. So keep gathering information. Thank you to everyone who turned up today. I am so grateful that you're here because every time you do it, you're taking an action. Like use this to write down that thing that you want to make time for on your calendar, block it out, set aside something because I know there's a goal and they're rattling around that you're not taking action on. I know that I have them. Everybody has them. So what can you do today? So I got to say, maybe you want to start a podcast even. So I got to say thank you to everyone for tuning in today, for being here. I love you so much. Rate, review, follow. Everything that you need is at amyedwards.info or follow me on Instagram at realamyedwards. I love you so much. Keep shining bright. Till next time.
Thank you so much for being here. Please rate, review, and follow us. And we'd love to hear your feedback. Keep shining bright.